In the last chapter, we used subclasses. Because a class existed that we only needed to modify, we could use that parent class and modify some or change some things about it to make our code work the way that we wanted it to. But that's not always the case. There may not always be a class for us to make into a subclass to modify. So you need to know how to create your own classes. For this example, we are going to suppose that we have a student management system. So basically like a student grade book, where we take a student's name and how many scores they have, and we can manipulate, determine the average, see the student scores, and do some other tasks with that. All classes in Python are organized in a tree-like hierarchy, and at the top of the tree is an abstract class called object. So any class that we build, object is its parent class. Let's create a new class called student. I have a file called student.py, and you do need to follow along with this tutorial because you'll need this file for your next assignment. To create a class, we use the keyword class and we give it a name. Remember, it's commonplace to capitalize the first letter of a class's name. We do have a set of parentheses. If we were defining this as a subclass of another class, we would have that parent class in parentheses. Since every class has object as a parent class, so we're working one node down from an object class, let's go ahead and include object there. Now this is not necessary, it's just because we need to have this vague understanding that this class that we're creating is a subclass of the object class. Now we need to provide a really good documentation string. So let's say represents a student. Each class needs an init method. The init method can also be called the class's constructor. It runs automatically when the user instantiates the class. In this case, we want our init method to take two arguments. We want it to have the name of the student and how many scores they have in the gradebook. Let's create an init method that will do this. Remember, our init method has two double underscores before and after. And I said that we wanted to take the name and how many scores that the student had. But if you'll recall from parent class, we always saw this word a lot, okay? That's because every method in a class needs to take the argument itself, whether or not it has an argument or not. So even if it looks like it doesn't have an argument, it still takes the argument itself. And then we said we wanted name and number. Now again, we're going to write really good documentation here. So how many ever scores the student has, we will represent them as zeros in the gradebook, okay? So we need something to store name because there's a good possibility we want to do other things with that student's name within this class. So we need to create an instance variable of name. To do that, we do self.name and we give it the value of name. We also want an instance variable to represent our scores. It will be an empty list right now, but then we'll use a for loop to populate it. So this loop is going to iterate what's the value of number that the user passes in. So if they pass in 4, it's going to iterate 4 times. And basically just add a 0 to our list here. Okay, so if we passed in 4, it would have 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 zeros. Okay, let's take a look over here in our shell and see if we have it doing what we need it to do. So if I want to create a new instance of a student, I could do S1. It's going to represent my new student. And I need to create from that blueprint a new object. And because I included this really good documentation here that's popping up for the user there, I need a name and a number. How many scores do they have? Okay. When I press enter, it doesn't look like anything happened, but actually something did happen. Because if I say print s1.name, it prints Mario. If I say print s1.scores, it prints a list with 4 zeros. Okay? Let's see what else we can do with this class. Oh, one more thing. Why are we including all this documentation? Well, what if I came over here and I was using this class and I got really confused and I did help student. Look at all this stuff. Our documentation shows up in the help method, or the help. Let's create a method that allows the user to easily get a student's name. Now we already, the class, when we instantiate a new instance of this class, it already knows the name and number because we passed those in. So it doesn't seem like you would need an argument here, but you do, because you've got to include self. And let's include some documentation. Okay, we need to use this instance variable, so self.name. And if we save and run again, now I can't reference the code that I used earlier. I can't say S1 get name because S1 no longer exists. It died when I refreshed this program. It's no longer in my computer's memory. So let me quickly create a new instance of that. And now if I do S1 get name, and because this is a method, I need to include parentheses after it, it does return Mario. Now this method that we just created is a type of accessor method. An accessor method allows the user to observe but not change the state of an object. Well, there are things that we do want to change because Mario in the gradebook is not going to have 4 zeros, hopefully. Hopefully Mario does his work and we can change his grade to different scores. We need to have some mutator methods. Mutator methods allow a user to modify an object state. Let's create a mutator method to set the score in the gradebook. For this method, we're going to suppose that the user is going to give us what number that they want to change in the gradebook. So if they said number 1, it would be the first item, number 2 would be the second, number 3 the third, number 4 the fourth, so on. So we'll call that I, and then we'll say score. Okay, we are going to give the user a little help because not everyone, especially if you're not a programmer, realizes that lists start counting at 0. So we're going to say I minus 1 so that the user can enter 1 for the first item, 2 for the second item, and so forth. Okay, let's save and refresh. And again, I can't just reference S1 because S1's no longer there. I'm going to have to give create a new instance of this class object. And if I use S1 set score, I'm going to need 2 arguments. So I'll say the first grade he made a 100. Okay? Doesn't look like anything happened, but if we did print S1 scores, We have 100 for the first one, 0, 0, and 0. Let's create an easier way for us to see the scores for the user. So let's create a method to, like we did for get name, only get scores. Okay, here's my method to do that. I'm going to save and run again. I'm going to change Mario's first score again to 100. And this time I'm going to use the get score to see what is in the first item of that list, and it is 100. If I do S1 get score 2, it should be a 0. And it is a 0. We may also want to know the average of our student. So let's create a method that will calculate the average. Let's also create a function that will get the high score, so whatever the highest score is of that particular student. Now let's run this again. And now that we have more methods, I want to show the help function again. So let's help student class. And as you can see, we have all of our methods and then what parameters they take and all of those doc strings. So this really helps someone that's working on our code understand what's going on with our student class. Now I'm going to create a new instance of student for Mario. And I'll also create one for Yoshi. Okay, so I've done some different things with our two objects. So we've got S1 and S2, one to represent Mario, one for Yoshi. Mario has 4 grades. He made 100, a 50, a 75, and he didn't turn in that 4th assignment, so he has a 0. But Yoshi is a star student, and he has turned in all of his assignments and has 100s all around. So now we can see what the averages are of these students. So I can do S1 get average, and there's the average of Mario. I can do S2 get average, and there's the average of Yoshi. Now I can do S1 get high score, and it should return a 100 because Mario did make 100. And of course, if I do S2 get high score, we'll get a 100 again because Yoshi made all 100s. Many methods also include a stir method, so let's create one of those for our student class. We're going to create it right here at the end. And it does need 2 double underscores, str double underscores. Again, we'll need to pass in the self argument. Okay, take a few moments if you need to pause to copy this code over. But this is just going to return a string representation. So it's going to take those numbers in our list and convert them to strings. We use the map function for that. So it's going to apply the string function on the iterable object self.scores and join those together separated by a space. Okay, I added some values in for S1 and S2 just so we would have something to work with over here. But if we wanted to call this method like we've called all the other methods, we could do S1 underscore underscore str underscore underscore set of parentheses because it's a method and it does return this. And if we did our code over here and just had it print out in the shell, it would have printed that correctly. It's just because we're working in the shell. But it did return that as a string value. But that's a lot of typing, right? Check this out. What? And if we did str s2, what? I didn't put any values in for Yoshi, okay? So this str, creating this str method in your class is a good way to help debug. You often want to observe the state of an object after running different methods, and that's an easy way for you to do that because you only have to type a couple of characters of code to get the output of what is currently the state of your objects. Now again, keep in mind that after I close this or do anything to it in F5 to refresh it again, all of my instance variables, S1s, S2s, are no longer with us. They have expired. Python virtual machine eventually recycles its storage in a process called garbage collection. So for all intents and purposes, if I refresh this browser, S1 and S2 have gone to the trash, and they will eventually be used to create other objects. As you can tell, if I did str S1, I get nothing. So take a few moments to read the rules of thumb for defining a simple class. This is on page 300 and 301. Also, I know it's kind of a redundant video because I have went over this content, but I do think this Corey Schaefer video that I've posted right below my current tutorial, he does a really excellent job of explaining this. So after you've worked with this content, maybe jet on over there and see how he explains it, because he does a really good job of explaining how the self works, and I have not done such a great job. Okay, on to the next thing.